Alright, so I wanted to have a lesson in here where I'm talking about brushes specifically. Now, up till now, I've been using a number of different brushes and changing the behaviors and everything like that, but I really wanted to talk about it more specifically because the brush engine is an extraordinarily powerful feature inside Photoshop. You can do all kinds of different things, and I'm only going to touch on a couple of different effects here, but this just can open up the possibilities of a whole bunch of different ways you can use brushes to create all kinds of effects. And I'm telling you, I have been using it for years, and I'm still experimenting and coming up with all kinds of new stuff. So, here's a couple of things. Here I have an image that I want to create kind of a cool lighting effect with, or rather a brush effect. And I'm going to actually create the brush to do this. And you can virtually turn anything into a brush. You can turn an image into a brush, a selected area. You can create graphics and turn them into brushes. If you remember with the halftone thing we did earlier, virtually anything. And the way it works is Photoshop defines the darkest areas of your image as the most opaque areas. So let's see what I'm talking about. I'm going to go in here and create a new file. And let's go ahead and make this, we'll go ahead and make it 8 inches by 8 inches at 150. So here we have a document. Now, I'm going to create a brush inside of here. Actually, I'm going to map this out. I'm going to take my crop tool and make this bigger because I can. Fill this area more so we can see what's going on. So, I'm going to create a brush, but I want to do it in a very unique way. I'm going to go ahead and create a new blank layer here, and I'm going to take my rectangular marquee tool, and I'm just going to draw a selection the length of the document. And not very tall, just about middle, right in the middle there. Then I'm going to grab the gradient tool over here, making sure we got black set as the foreground color. And again, making sure we're using the foreground to transparent gradient. And using the linear, of course, the very first gradient here, make sure all the other settings are set to normal. And starting at the very bottom of the selection, I'm going to hold down my shift key and just drag upwards a little. And not quite that much. And right about like that. Now, I'm just going to draw that one more time. So just like that. Well, now, I could go ahead and define this as a brush. The problem is it's going to have these very hard edges over here. So what I'm going to need to do is actually create a layer mask on this. And again, using that same gradient, I'm going to just mask inside the left and right areas there, leaving me this kind of flat, kind of horizon type of gradient. Well, I no longer need the layer mask on here, so I'm just going to go ahead and throw that away. And it's going to ask me if I want to apply it or delete it. I'm going to go ahead and apply it. I'm going to press Command and Control T and modify the size here. I'm actually going to squeeze this down a little bit. And maybe squeeze it in slightly. I'm actually going to go ahead and bring it vertical. I like to start my brushes at vertical positions before I go and use them. So there we have a shape that's going to be our brush. Now, I don't have to select it. You notice the entire document here is all white, and this one area is black and got some grays in there. When I go under the Edit menu and choose Define Brush Preset, it's only going to look at those areas where those pixels are, or where those darker area or darker pixels are, and define that area as the brush. So you can see it's only looking at that area, defining it. Everything looks cool. Let's jump back into our image that we're going to paint in. So, in this image, we're going to go and create a new blank layer, of course, and let's go into the brush or the toolbar and grab the brush tool, and we're going to go in there and jump right in here and grab that brush we just created. It should be the very last one in the list here. And you'll drag over here and you'll notice that the brush itself looks like that shape. Well, if I click once in the background, let's make sure we're painting with a color we can see. We'll put white in the foreground there, and I click once, there that shape is. Well, I'm going to need to modify the brush, of course, on the way it behaves, but I need to adjust the layer style real quick. So with that shape on this layer, I'm going to go ahead and double-click on that and open up the layer style panel and apply an outer glow. And this is kind of a hint of the light effects we're going to do a little bit later, but let's give you a quick hint. I'm just going to get a blue color there, set the opacity to 100, and the blend mode to hard light. And let's increase that size a little bit there. So we're getting a kind of a cool glow around that shape. So I've set the layer style. I'm going to go ahead and press Command or Control A and then hit delete. So I've deleted the shape off the layer, but notice the layer style is still there. So no matter what we do on this layer, it's going to look right. So let's go into the brush engine and modify the brush a little bit. Well, first thing we're going to do is actually rotate it. So I'm going to take the angle and just rotate it, give it a slight angle there. As you can see, it looks just like that. And let's apply some shape dynamics here. I'm going to make the size jitter. And I'm going to go ahead and scatter it like crazy. So I'm going to scatter on both axes and take it all the way up to 1,000. And I'm going to space them out a little bit. I'm actually going to go back into the brush tip shapes and take the spacing up considerably. Let's take it to around 100. And if we paint in here, let's see what we get. Well, we're getting a pretty cool effect. And I'm thinking I don't want it to have the size jittering. So I'm going to go ahead and turn all that feature off. And I'm going to increase the size a little bit. Too much. Take it to around, get it close to 1,000 there. There we go. So now let's go into the brush, or go into our document, and just randomly paint in some shapes here. And notice what it's doing. It's giving me a cool kind of pattern right there. Well, I'm going to go ahead and create a new blank layer and apply a new layer style to that one. Let's go ahead and double click on this and apply another outer glow. And this time let's get kind of a pinkish one. Why not? And the cool thing is that these are layer styles. We can change them anytime we want. So that's in place. Let's go ahead and hit that, and let's paint on this layer and see what we get. Oh, we're getting some cool lighting there. It's painting in the various effects. If it scatters too much, or if the size is too much, you can always go back in there and modify it. Make it scatter a little bit more. There's we'll put in a little bit of an effect right there. And it looks pretty good. But we're losing the image back here. Well, no problem. Let's go ahead and put a layer mask on there, and using that brush tool. Now you can use the same brush, of course, if you want. Notice if we paint with black with that same brush, it'll mask out certain parts of the image. Let's go over to the original layer, the one with the blue on it, put a layer mask on that, and again paint with that brush. So you can use the brush to apply the effect, and every bit as much as erase it as well. So it kind of gives it a little bit of variation there. Let's go back over in this. You notice I'm selecting on the layer mask, and now we're just painting with black on the layer mask. So it's modifying that effect ultimately altogether. I'm redrawing the layer style as we go. But we do want to bring the face in a little bit more there, so let's go in here and actually grab a regular soft edge brush. Now before I do that, now I have gone through the trouble of creating this brush and doing all this cool stuff. I may want to use it again, so let's do this. Let's save it as a brush preset. I'm going to go into the preset menu here and go into New Tool Preset, and we'll call this, we'll call it Blade Brush. Include color? Fine. So now that blade brush is saved. Now if I go in here and choose a different brush, I won't lose those settings. So let's actually go in here and load the basic brushes and get a nice soft edge brush here, and turning off all these features. Still on that layer mask. Let's just go in here and bring out the face a little bit more. That's probably erasing a bit more than I want it to. So let's bring the opacity of that brush down to about 50%. And now we're painting in those areas, bringing back part of that image. So let's do the same thing down here. Again, I'm just painting on the layer mask. I haven't even done anything to my original image yet. So we're getting that effect of this shape kind of intertwining around her and all that cool stuff. Well, let's enhance this a little bit more by adding a little bit of gradients on these same layers. Selecting back on the layer itself, you notice the outline is on the layer now, not the layer mask. Grab that gradient tool. And again, using the foreground to transparent, set white as your foreground color, and this time we're going to use the radial gradient right here. And on this layer, you can see that this is the pink layer. So I'm going to actually put this gradient down here in this bottom left corner, or the bottom right corner, rather, and just draw this box out. And it gives me kind of an interesting shape there. Let's do the same thing over here. I'm going to select this topmost layer, and I'm going to draw a shape out there. Oh, let's make sure we're on the right layer. There we go. Now it's giving me that blue effect. So now it's giving me a very interesting effect there. So it's almost like there's a light source back here and a light source up front here, and it's enhancing those color effects in there. But that was all done using those brushes. Well, let's take it a little bit further. You can also use really cool brushes and scatter brushes for masking effect. As you saw, I just kind of did a hint of it a while ago, but you can actually do that as part of a design. For instance, here, I've got an image of the surfer here. I'm going to go ahead and double click on the layer and go ahead and make it a regular layer there. And I'm going to plop a new layer underneath this currently active layer. I'm going to hold down my Command or Control key and then click that new layer icon. And now we've got a new layer down there. Let's go ahead and fill this with a color. I'm going to go into my swatches and use this custom swatch, this yellow I used earlier. And with that set as my foreground color, I'm just going to press Option Delete, and it will fill the background in there. And let's give this a little bit of a texture. I'm going to go under the Filter menu and go to Texture, Texturizer. And let's just use this sandstone right here. It's right here. It's a custom, it's a preset right in their menu there. And I'm going to leave the scaling at 100. I'll set the relief at 5 and the lighting at the top right. That looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and hit OK. So let's turn on that surfer layer above it. And all we're going to do is bring back that texture in a very cool way. We're going to do it with a brush. So I'm going to go ahead and select the brush tool. And back inside the brush menu, in fact, let's do this from the brush menu, or brush options menu right here. So the brush tip shape, I want to go and I want to open up a set of preset brushes. So I go to this flyout menu and we're going to choose right down here, square brushes. And we'll just append it to the existing list. So here we get collection of just basic square size brushes, just like that. So let's modify it a little bit. Well, I'm going to activate shape dynamics and take the size jittering all the way up, and I'm going to go ahead and use pen pressure. I am using a pressure sensitive tablet. You don't have to, but I'm going to go ahead and check that on. And let's turn on the scattering and really kind of blow these things out of the way there. As you can see, it's going really crazy there. I'm going to take that brush tip shape and increase the spacing a little bit. And I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to increase that size a little bit. And by increasing the size, we're not affecting anything we've done. We're just making it bigger. So now, let's put a layer mask on that surfer layer and go in here and see what we get. I'm going to use painting with black. We're just going to paint away. Of course, make sure we're at 100% opacity on the brush, and we were at 50 there. It wasn't looking all that great. And we're just going to paint away the part of the surfer image we don't want to see. And you notice the size is changing because I'm varying the pressure I'm pushing at. Now, before I go any further, just so this effect is looking a little bit better, I'm going to go ahead and put a layer style on this layer. So I'm going to double click on that layer icon, and let's just apply a quick drop shadow. Notice the change it's made. Now it gives it a little bit of depth. It's looking really cool. So simple layer style of a drop shadow, and now let's go back in here and continue painting. On the layer mask, of course. Make sure you're selected on that. And let's just paint away more pixels there. So we'll just kind of take away most of this, or if not all of this side here, and just kind of give it a cool scattering effect. So we're revealing most of that, and I can drop some text in here or have some kind of effect going on. And I can go in here and modify the brush a little bit more. Let's maybe increase that spacing and increase that scattering. And we'll just get a few scattered areas inside the image here. I'm just pressing and dragging just to get a few areas in there, just because so it has more of a look of a scattered, kind of broken up look to it. And we can always go and clean up these other areas by simply going in there and getting a regular brush. Let's go here and we'll just get this regular square brush here. Make that brush a little bit bigger, and let's just paint away in detail some of those other areas that we don't want. Maybe we don't want that. But now that's given me a really cool kind of edge effect. And you know what? I just did it down the middle of this image, and this could be part of a design or something, but imagine doing it as a border. You could paint around an image to mask out or even paint in various effects. Now, you notice we're masking away. If all I do is simply press the X key on my keyboard and bring it to white, I can bring back parts of that image. So let's go back in there and set some of that scattering. We'll set that scatter on, and size, and increase that spacing. So earlier we were painting away by painting with black. Now if we're painting with white, we can bring elements back in. And that's the beauty of it being on a layer mask, is that we're not deleting it, we're just hiding it, and we can always bring it right back to make the effect a little more intense. Very cool stuff. So just wanted to show you a couple of things about brushes and the possibilities you have of trying different things, not just on the image, but on the layer mask as well, to get a really cool and interesting effect.